Several minutes of commercial-free football starts now.
Here are the Purple Mortgage Guys.
Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Purple Mortgage Guys. We're three mortgage guys that just love talking Vikings football. Thought we'd bring you a little special edition here on a Thursday night since that Bears-Panthers game is no good. We got John Hendrix joining us. John's a longtime writer and reporter for the Saints and works, I believe, John, for Fan Nation at si.com. Hope I didn't butcher that, but if I did, go ahead and correct our audience here. But welcome. Why don't you, just give us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I write for Saints News Network. I've been doing that, going on about to hit year number 5 doing that. And so just been full-time covering this team for a long time. I started from the lowest of lows on the totem pole and worked my way up and stuff. I didn't go to college for any of this. I'm just a guy that loves football and, just kind of developed into a hidden passion of mine. And, I get paid to do this and never feels like a job to me, but covering the Saints, I've been through the highs and I've been through a lot of these lows for the past couple of years, but man, I love it. I love the locker room. I love the interaction. I love the game days atmosphere. I'm looking forward to coming to Minneapolis. I've never been to the stadium up there, so I get to cross that one off my bucket list. So it'll be fun, man. I love what I do, man.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, welcome. I think we'll probably just jump right in here, John. So the Saints and Vikings share a record 5-4. You guys are leading your division, the NFC South. Got Atlanta, Tampa, and Carolina obviously there, and maybe an off year for the division, but same record. Played a lot of the same teams by the looks of it here, and you guys got off to a good 2-0 start, and then been kind of around 500 here most of the season. So as Vikings fans, what should we expect from this year's version of the Saints team? What does that look like?
Yeah, look, I tell you this is early on in the season. Look, I think it was fool's gold the way they were able to go 2-0, and look, a win's a win in the NFL, right? It doesn't matter how you get it, but I think we felt like, man, this offense could do something, and then they kind of hit the wall a little bit where you're just seeing guys not on the same page. You're just seeing red zone struggles, third down struggles. I mean, just all the things. The defense was still playing really, really well, exceptionally well, but ultimately they've really found ways to beat themselves. So you look at the Packers game, they self-destruct, lose a 17-point lead, and then they can't make the field goal at the end. Then they come back, they beat up on New England a little bit, and then that seemed like fool's gold because Tampa comes in and just absolutely shuts them down, in Jacksonville. So it's kind of been like Jekyll and Hyde. But I think, coming out of the mini bye after the Jaguars, we're starting to see the team that we believe is going to be for the rest of the way, which is improvements on offense. They were averaging 289 yards a game for the first 5. Over the past several games, past 4, they're up on almost 400 yards a game in each of them. And so you compare that to some of the prolific offenses out there, they're actually moving the football and converting and putting together drives. The only big thing I'm really concerned about is the defense struggling out of the gate for the last 4 games out in the first half. And so I think that's something that has to get cleaned up. But, ultimately the chemistry is starting to come together. Guys know who Taysom Hill is. Taysom Hill is a big part of their offense. Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave are big focal points, but it all hinges around Derek Carr on the offensive side. And look, I think he's done a decent job, but I think the best is yet to come because look, we're only 9 games into his tenure here. And you go back and look at somebody like Drew Brees in his first year with the Saints, he wasn't that good. If you really look at his numbers, check it out, but he wasn't the greatest, I guess. But the difference is they had wins on that team. This one, they don't have as many wins. So it's a lot different team than, the Vikings have played way in the past.
Yeah, definitely. The Drew Brees years are definitely over. How's Carr been received down in New Orleans? Is that Jekyll and Hyde, like you said, with the rest of the team, or is it a lot of positivity with Carr under center for the Saints this year?
It's mixed, because you go back to it and look, I hated the fact that we never got to see Jameis Winston play a full 17 games because I was really interested in seeing that. But you have a lot of people divided that some people still want Jameis to play. They've been wanting Jameis to play. But look, they signed Carr to the deal. They brought him in. He's their quarterback. That's how it's going to be, right? And so, I think the mini bye taught us a good bit, because really the biggest things is that he was really emotional. And I think the problem that he's faced coming into this is that I've got to be the guy that fixes everything, and that's just not the case for him. And so I think there might be some past tendencies he brought over from the Raiders organizations, which isn't a bad thing. But over that mini bye, they kind of got out a little bit of the dirty laundry and aired out things with him in the office. He took it upon himself to kind of talk with these guys and figure things out with them and kind of hash it out. Not that it was like negative, and of course they're going to keep all that in house, but it was productive conversation. And you saw what they were able to do in Indianapolis. You saw what they were able to do last week, moving the football against the Bears. And so the biggest question is, can they keep it going? Is it the continuity, and can be consistent and just execute? That's really the biggest thing. But I think Carr, it's a mixed bag. But look, in the locker room, he's one of the best guys out there. He handles himself extremely well. He's extremely positive. They brought this guy in for a reason. In the offseason, he was their number one target for sure. It was, if they didn't get him, it was going to be Jimmy Garoppolo, and thank goodness that didn't happen. But look, Carr is a guy that they really do think highly of, and they think he's just getting started here.
You see him as the long-term answer then, John?
Well, at least for the foreseeable future, right? I mean, they're kind of tied to that contract at least next year and the year after. But, it's going to be interesting to see where they go. And look, some things with the Saints offense, their offensive line has not had really much continuity. They have had it over the past couple of games. And so I think we're starting to see him. I mean, knock on all the wood, this team has actually been really healthy. The past couple of years have been really fluky. They've dealt with so many different injuries and lost so many man games to injury and such. But, they're going into a spot where I think they're going to be just fine. But look, I think Derek's only going to get more comfortable in this offense and just be able to do things. I mean, he brings things to the game, to the table, where like he's making the calls and the checks at the line of scrimmage. I mean, that wasn't happening before him. That, outside of Drew, that was falling under center Eric McCoy. So I think he's going to be a guy that, this first year is definitely the proving grounds to help win some of these fans over, because ultimately the goal is playoffs or nothing, right? I think that's the biggest thing for here. And then build upon that, because I think, you look at his age, 32, right, is he's still a relatively young quarterback in this league in some aspects, but he's still got some upside to offer. And so we'll see. The verdict's out. But again, for the foreseeable future, he is their guy. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Awesome. Yeah, we were talking before you jumped on here, John, Goose and I, about Taysom Hill and how he scares us for some reason. And I think we've got a few different reasons for that. But Goose, why don't you ask John your question you had for him there?
Yeah, it's an interesting player. There's certain players that always seem to have your team's number. Taysom seems like one of those guys. And then for fantasy purposes, after we play a game against the Saints, I'm always like, quarterback in the tight end slot, like this seems like a no-brainer. And then you pick him up and he has 4 games in a row with like 3 fantasy points. And it's like, man, are they just underutilizing him? What's going on? And as I was, looking at some of your work, John, I'd already had that thought. And then I read your really interesting stat about, I believe you had quoted that they're like 18-1 if he gets seven or more carries, which I read that and I'm like, how does that stat exist? And you don't have more than 19 games where you give him the ball more than 7 times. And I kind of want to hear how you feel. Like, is he just underutilized? Does he have off games? Like, what's your standpoint on that?
Yeah, I think last year was a big tipping point because, they didn't use him in the first half a lot. If they use him in the second half, or even when they put him in a game, it's like, this works. Why are you not going to it? But like this year, I think they're starting to find it a good bit because, it's interesting because Taysom does more than just, run the football. He plays special teams. He's on the kick coverage or punt coverage mainly is what he does. He can catch the ball. He can throw the ball. I don't think it's as clear cut as him just saying, okay, Taysom's in the game. He's going to run the football, because we've seen him pass the ball as well, and a little bit more than I think I've remembered. But, for him, there's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense. And the good thing about it is nobody's griping for not getting touches or anything, but there's just so many things that go into the game plan. And look, you got to know your opponent, right? And obviously what they get on some of the success, the first 15 players are usually scripted plays. And so outside of that, it's trying to figure out where does Taysom fit. You see him a lot more in the short yardage situations or goal line, red zone packages. That's really his bread and butter. But again, he could just do so many other things for that. But, ultimately every game is different, right? Depending on who you go. But, there was a point where he was kind of the only real healthy, back out there. So he's getting handoffs and pitches and all this other stuff. But, I'm with you. I don't know exactly why they don't use him as much as they do at some points. But, in the games that you see him and that he's able to affect the game, good things happen. And I think down the stretch, they found a way in coming into this offseason. They said they had a better way or better thought of how to use him going forward. I don't know if we saw it as much early in the season, but I think we're starting to see it ramp up a good bit, which is somewhat scary. But, ultimately, I think Hill's a guy that can change the momentum so quickly. It's hard to figure out what he's going to do exactly. And even when he does get into the first, second level, it's so tough to bring him down. I mean, you see film from last week, the Bears guy has a clear shot at him, just bounces right off of him. So he's just unique type of guy. And I mean, he's a little bit older, but he's like a cannonball when he comes down and hits somebody, not afraid to hit contact.
Yeah. I think based off our first go around that we had a couple of years ago, I can't remember if it was Jefferson's rookie year or not, but I think one of the primary matchups that people are probably looking forward to a lot this weekend was Justin Jefferson and Marshawn Lattimore. I don't know if we're going to get that. Jefferson has been designated to come off IR, but it sounds like it's going to be another week yet before he plays. Since we're not going to have that this weekend, most likely, do you have another matchup that you're excited to see this weekend?
I think it's Dobbs versus the Saints defense, because they are not good when it comes to a quarterback that can get out of the pocket. I mean, you look at last week with Tyson Bagent, the way he was been able to do, but it's not just him. Trevor Lawrence gave him problems. Stroud gave him problems. Young's given problems. Jordan Love, all these quarterbacks. And so what typically happens, and this is probably what I'm waiting to see, is if the first read's not there for the quarterback, he's taking off, because he's going to be able to pick up 10, 12 yards, maybe more, maybe if it's at 5-6 yards. Dobbs is going to take that every single day. And so what's interesting is that they know that, and they're trying to preach the fact of stay in your lane integrity, your rush lanes and all that other stuff. And, Joe Woods, our defensive coordinator here, he's actually was, with Dobbs as on staff when Dobbs was a player for him, Cleveland and other places and such. So it was just one of those that, I think that's the big matchup, because Dobbs came in and for all intents and purposes, man, he embarrassed Atlanta, which is, for Saints fans, that's just warms your heart, right? Because it's Atlanta, it's like if somebody goes and embarrasses Green Bay, you guys know how that is. But, it's one of those that I think you see what he was able to do in such a short time, and a guy that just hasn't had the opportunities, full-fledged opportunities, but comes in and makes an impact like that. And in a lot of ways, I think he might have saved the Viking season in some aspects. Of course, time will tell, but you lose Kirk Cousins and now you turn to him, and you thought it was going to be, the other quarterback, Hall, and with concussion. But, I think that's, for me, the interesting matchup. I was there in London last year. It was fun to watch, Jefferson and Lattimore go at each other, even Thielen going at it with, Adebo or other receivers. But I think that's got to be your marquee matchup is Dobbs versus Saints defense, because I don't know what to expect from them as far as, with Dobbs and his ability to be mobile. That's the concerning part.
John, you you triggered something here, and I've got to ask the question. So with Vikings fans, the 2009 season, obviously we had that bitter taste in our mouth with the Saints for quite some time. And I feel like it's transferred a little bit for us to Philadelphia because of the 2017 NFC Championship, and then we just keep getting kind of embarrassed when we play them. How do Saints fans feel about the Vikings in general? Because we've had some success recently. We had the miracle game, obviously the 2019 playoff. Is that a real thing, or is that just like manufactured because we have nothing better to talk about up here in the Midwest?
No, I think it's a real thing. And I tell you this because Saints fans, they go thick and thin. And so I'm a lot older than I look. But, you go back to 87, the Saints had that 12-3 run, Vikings come into the postseason. They ended up beating them at home. That's a big deal. That kind of sets a bad taste in their mouth. And even when they get their first playoff win in 2000, they have to go travel up to Minnesota and they get embarrassed, kind of, if you will, in postseason. And so, I mean, it's just one of those that I think that you look at it that regular season is one thing, but man, that's the team I don't want to play in the postseason because you mentioned the Minneapolis Miracle, you mentioned the Rudolph catch in OT. That's obviously a stinger too, but I think those are the things that you look at with this particular matchup is that, those types of things have happened, especially came in. I think it started because of the championship game. And I think some of the feedback was, about the OT roles and all this other stuff and, all the things that came out later and such. But I think that's where it all kind of hit ahead. But for the older season fans, I think it goes back way before that,
Sure.
obviously. But, I don't know if he'd say rivalry, but obviously there's a lot more eyes on it than a little bit when it comes to it. And, I think still when you look at anybody's rivals, it's the Falcons, number one. Cowboys are number two for this team. And, you may group the Bucks in there potentially. I mean, not always, but, there's just all these other ones that you look at. But, I mean, anytime these two teams play, what's going to be brought up. Everybody knows it. It's not a mystery anymore.
Right. Well, John, one thing we always like to talk about is if things go wrong from the Vikings perspective and we come out with a loss, what's that look like? What are we talking about on Monday? So we'll ask you, the Saints expert here. The Vikings come up short on Sunday, meaning the Saints win, and John's a happy guy. What happened in that game that made the Saints successful?
Yeah, I think they get off to a good start and they keep the consistency going with the third down and red zone. I mean, red zone, they're still kind of bottom of the league, 28th right now, which is not to anything to be happy about, but they are improving, last couple of weeks, 60% or better. They were 75% against Colts, 60 against the Bears, and two of those on the red zone were in this game sequences, so they don't really count. But the third down numbers 50% in both of these weeks. I think that's the big things. If they can continue that continuity and put sevens instead of threes up, especially getting out to an early lead, I think that's going to be their best friend. And of course, that's going to be harder, a lot easier said than done, going up in a road game. But I think they are a better road team than they have been at home. They've just been very underwhelming at home, just not good for the past couple of years. It's just for whatever it is. I don't know. COVID probably sucked the life out of it, for lack of a better phrase. But, I think when it comes down to it, the Card plays a relatively mistake-free game. They keep him upright. They get Kamara going a little bit. They get Taysom Hill going a good bit. They were able to lean on that passing game with Chris Olave, convert some of these red zone opportunities. And then defensively, I think that puts the pressure a little bit more on Dobbs. And now he's going to have more time. And so I don't know if the Lightning is going to strike twice here, but, he's going to be able to move the football a little bit. But you just wonder how much is it going to be? Is it going to be struggling, or you see a lot more of the struggles now that people have a little bit more film on him, or somebody like a Joe Woods knows who Dobbs is and maybe his tendencies and such. But, I think that's where it goes, because now they're in the driver's seat. They go into their bye week after this game, and then Atlanta does too, and it sets up a really fun, matchup for Week 12 being on the road in Atlanta. So that's a big, meaningful game. But, I think after it's all said and done, that's the things that the Saints do. And then defensively, man, they had 5 turnovers last week. They got to put more points up on the board off those turnovers, but they are a fierce one. They're tied for first in the league with Jacksonville with 18 turnovers, and their +8 differential is second in the league, tied for second. So they're doing a lot of the fundamental things a good football team would do to constitute winning.
Well, the good news, if you're a Saints fan, is the Vikings love to turn the football over, so you'll get your opportunities there. John, we want to thank you for jumping on with us tonight. How does someone follow you, John, if they want to find you online and follow you?
Yeah, you got the X or Twitter handle over here on the bottom left, and so that's the easiest way. And then all the writing is saints.media is probably the easiest thing. Or if you go to si.com/NFL/Saints, which is a mouthful, saints.media is the easiest one. Just go over there, and you'll find everything you need to know. I've always travel. I'm there at every single game, practice, all that fun stuff. And so it's all firsthand knowledge about everything when it comes to it. So, you can go other places, but I feel pretty plugged in and know about this team, get a good pulse on them, and cover them as objectively as I can, and so it's a fun ride for sure. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and obviously a shout out.
Awesome. So it's your first time to US Bank Stadium?
First time to the stadium. It'll be like my 5th time in Minneapolis, because I used to actually once upon a time work for Best Buy, and they're headquartered up in Richfield, I believe. And so I was in Minneapolis a good bit. I've been to Twins games and stuff, but I've never been to that stadium. I've actually been to like Lambeau 3 times or 4 times now, I think. But that's one I got to cross off my bucket list now. So I'm actually happy. I'm staying downtown. So if you guys want to send me food recs or anything I got to check out, just let me know. But I'll take them. But I'm really excited to go up there to cross a bucket off.
Where are you staying at, John? I'm staying downtown as well this weekend. So.
I think it's it's one of the Hiltons, the Curio. It's like 0.6 of a mile from the stadium. Yeah, a couple of them. So
yeah, you'll enjoy the stadium.
Something like that. Yeah, I hear it's one of the best. So that's what I hear from some of my colleagues. Is like that stadium is hard to beat in some of them. And I've been to some. Some are just not good, not as good as you would think it is. Like I was in Allegiant Stadium for Raiders in that opener with COVID, and I was really unimpressed for it. Like I wasn't impressed with it. It was just seemed kind of generic and bland, I guess, if that makes any sense. Atlanta's got a lovely stadium. They're fantastic. And of course, Jerry World, you got to go up there is something, but every stadium's different and unique in its own way. SoFi is pretty cool. When I was there at a preseason game, I got to experience a tropical storm and a tropical storm and an earthquake in the same day. That wasn't fun because I live down south, so I already deal with tropical storms. On the West Coast, and then when I'm up in the press box, I hit an earthquake alarm. I had no idea what to do. I just sat there and froze. I'm like, I think I'm going to die.
The best we can do, we've got fake snow at US Bank Stadium, so you'll get that. But
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, John, for joining. Enjoy
John.
The game on Sunday, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate you guys. Have a one.
Thanks.